passenger cars. But when you go for the heavy vehicles, the trucks, batteries is not a solution. But you can also apply ethanol in the diesel cycle. There are engines on the market today. There are 2 buses in Sao Paulo. We have 500 buses in Stockholm. There are energy efficient running on ethanol that are on diesel. These are Scania engines. We have worked with them for more than 20 years. Works perfectly. Now we're moving into heavy trucks because we see that as an enormous need, because batteries is not a solution for that. We need liquid fuel for them. But you cannot use batteries as a solution for the heavy trucks. A heavy truck consumes 100 times more fuel than a passenger car. Scania, as they are working with this now, they are planning to have a production of 150,000 heavy trucks by 2015. In their internal plans, and this is not official numbers, but 10% of their sales by 2015 should be ethanol heavy trucks. That would require 2.2 million cubic meters extra every year just to meet that annual sales. They expect to do 200,000 trucks by 2030, and then a third of the sales would be ethanol. That you need 10 million cubic meters extra every year. So a 10-year fleet of that is 100 million cubic meters. That's the same volume as the entire global production of today, just to get the magnitudes. Well, they are representing less than 5% of the global demand. So if you switch heavy trucks that cannot operate on batteries, you are talking magnitudes of 2,000 million cubic meters, 20 times more than the global production of today. If you then assume we are very successful or moving into plug-in hybrids, you need another 1,000 million cubic meters. That is 30 times more than the global production today. My point is, there is no risk that we'll meet all the needs. There is absolutely no risk there will be a shortage of sustainable biofuels. That's a certainty. There will be a shortage. This industry is in a gridlock right today where we have too much of biofuels. So the industry in the US going down the drain, the industry in Europe is going down the drain, and the Brazilian industry taking a big hit because we have too much. Because we're not developing the market and the ethanol case, in my view, in a correct way. So, partly answering your question, one of the absolutely mandatory prerequisites for this, we have to have a very high level of sustainability. It is absolutely mandatory for the credibility of the future development of biofuels. Secondly, it will reduce the risk for the investors because the market will demand that. And actually, it's mandatory to make it into energy global commodity. That's the first requirement to make it the right way. The second thing, that is, we should go much more for high blends. I think it's a dead end just to focus on the low blends. First of all, that's the only alternative that we can actually significantly reduce CO2 emissions. Secondly, it's the only alternative to significantly reduce oil dependency. Because low blends, 10 or 15%, well, what do we do with the rest with 85, 90%? If you're going to reduce 80%. However, in order to go for high blends, because we tried to convince the Volkswagen, Renault, the Volvo, the GM, the Ford in Europe, and they don't see how they can change the system if there is not a reliable, large-scale sourcing of ethanol. And we don't have that today. Secondly, it needs success then for very cost-competitive ethanol. And it also have to be very CO2 efficient. And all that points to sugarcane ethanol produced in large scale, available for the high blend market. But today, the market is in gridlock, and there is too much uncertainty that characterizes this global ethanol industry. So there is a dilemma for the market, and I can, as a representative for SECAB, I can put 4 hats on me. One hat is saying that we are a co-investor into a project of corn-based ethanol in Eastern Europe. There is a lot of uncertainty, but what will happen with the tariffs on the long term? If you take away the tariffs, you cannot invest in the surplus usage of grain that is in Europe. Uncertainty. Secondly, we are a developer of cellulose ethanol. In order to be able to introduce that successfully on the market, should we meet the price level of the European production or meet the price level of the Brazilian production? If it is Brazilian production, we will never be able to introduce that within 5 or perhaps even 10 years. As we heard, we also participate in developing projects in Africa. If these projects will be forced to compete with the low cost of Brazilian initially, no way that you can attract investors to Africa. There's a lot of uncertainty. And also, we are the largest importer of Brazilian ethanol to Europe. But it's a lot of uncertainty. What about the future rules for trade and so on? So these enormous potentials to substantially reduce oil dependency are lost because these current tariffs are driving all the fuel to the low blends. And that is a battlefield. And that's where everyone is a loser, really, as it is today. So we know how the high blend market can be developed, like here in Brazil. In Sweden next year, the volumes are larger for high blends than for low blends. It took us 4 years to develop that market. And if we can do it, every other market in Europe can do it. And of course, the US can also do it. So the trade approach today is in gridlock, and we're losing opportunities. The only winner is the status quo, and actually more usage of fossil fuel. So in order to develop this untapped market and get the market to flourish, Brazil is currently the only partner that can actually reliably provide large volumes of low-cost, CO2-efficient ethanol to the global market. But this requires then a concerted action between politicians in Brazil and Europe and the US, another side. Producers, suppliers, politicians, and environment will be winners if we can do this. We have to get out of this gridlock. So what we need, and this is a very pragmatic proposition that we worked on for 2 years, because we are so frustrated seeing all these potentials being lost. From 2010 to 2025, have a managed trade deal between Brazil at one hand and European Union at the other hand, but also in parallel with the US. Imported ethanol should be free from import duty tariffs and all these differentiated tax regulations. With one exemption. That will never work if the industry in Europe feels threatened or the industry in the US will be threatened to just be extinguished from the market. Leave that the market for the low blends for the producers in the US and in Europe. Then they feel secure. There is a market for them. There is a long-term investment predictability they can invest in. But still, the big market for the high blends will be open for free trade. And just to be even more sure, have a robust regulatory system, which we already have in place, add then with very high fines, with very high fines. So if anyone tries to, let's say, fool the system and import duty-free and use that on the low-blend market, it's prohibitive. Fines are 10 times higher than you can actually gain from that. So simply, that market and that market. Tariffs on Brazilian ethanol, because otherwise the strong lobby groups in Europe and US will never accept that, and there are reasons for them to survive. And this market, no tariffs, totally free trade like oil. That will create a new platform for the ethanol and into global energy commodity. Much more predictability for everyone involved in the business, for investors in Brazil and also in the US, in Africa, and in Europe. All the hidden agendas there is around now, we're talking sustainability and so on, a lot of hidden agendas. Be much more constructive handled if we get these issues of trade off the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Per, for your presentation and for coming to us with a proposed way forward on tariffs. I'm sure that will trigger many questions. Speaking of which, questions should be submitted in written. Please direct yourself to the support staff to get the form. These questions will then be given to me, and I will filter to ensure I can differentiate the different themes. So our next speaker is Victor do Prado, who served in the Brazilian mission in Geneva during the final stages of the Uruguay round and early years of WTO. He's been a member of the Textiles Monitoring Body, chairman of the Committee on Subsidies and Countervailing Measures, and was also a panelist in several WTO dispute settlement procedures. Currently, Mr. de Prado is Deputy Head of Cabinet in the Office of the WTO Director General, Mr. Pascal Lamy, whom he advises on the DDA negotiations, including agriculture and market access. He's equally responsible for advising Mr. Lamy on Latin American affairs and specifically for relations with Brazil. Mr. de Prado, the floor is yours. And I would like to alert also that Mr. de Prado will be giving his presentation in Portuguese. So those who need translation into English, please make necessary arrangement.
Muito obrigado. Boa tarde a todos. Em primeiro lugar, queria agradecer à UNICA pelo convite tão gentil para participar deste importante evento. Eu agradecer meu querido amigo Marcos Yank pelo convite e por nos dar a oportunidade, nós que lá na OMC lutamos para um sistema multilateral que possa justamente dar alguma previsibilidade e atacar as incertezas de que o Per acabou de falar. Eu gostaria, em primeiro lugar, de falar um pouco sobre diferentes objetivos e diferentes maneiras de ver biocombustíveis no Brasil e nos Estados Unidos e na Europa. Isso é uma coisa importante porque o Brasil, onde o programa do pró-álcool começou nos anos 70, tem uma visão e uma ideologia sobre biocombustíveis que é completamente diferente da ideologia ou da maneira de ver biocombustíveis na Europa e nos Estados Unidos. Como todos nós brasileiros sabemos, o programa do pró-álcool iniciou-se basicamente por uma necessidade econômica. Nós vivíamos o tempo de choques do petróleo, crise monetária no Brasil, substituição de importações, e havia basicamente uma racionale econômica. A parte ambiental era, um bônus no pró-álcool, não era o fulcro do programa. Isso é absolutamente diferente na Europa e nos Estados Unidos. Os americanos, evidentemente, se preocupam muito mais com segurança energética e, evidentemente, se preocupam também com os aspectos ambientais. Os europeus, evidentemente, têm no meio ambiente a sua consideração principal ao falar de biocombustíveis. Isso é importante porque há uma diferença de visão entre Brasil, Europa e Estados Unidos, ou pelo menos diferentes matizes na visão que cada um deles tem sobre biocombustíveis, o que de alguma maneira informa a posição desses países sobre o assunto. Não deixo de observar que é justamente no lugar onde houve um desenvolvimento dos biocombustíveis baseado numa perspectiva econômica que há a maior eficiência na produção dos combustíveis. Só uma parte. São algum pouquinho de informação básica. Etanol, evidentemente, domina a produção de biocombustíveis. O Brasil e os Estados Unidos respondem por volta de 80% da produção mundial de etanol. Biodiesel, concentrado na União Europeia, mais ou menos 85% da produção mundial. As posições em comércio muito diferentes e refletem, de alguma maneira, essas diferentes estratégias e diferentes maneiras de ver biocombustíveis. O Brasil tem uma tarifa de importação relativamente baixa, 20%,